Reversionary interests. Future interests in transferor, page 10 of real property. A. Possibilities of reverter and rights of entry. These future interests are discussed in the present possessory interests section I just read. Actually, we're still in present. No, we're not. Hold on a minute. We'll start with future estates. Interests. I'm sorry. Future interest is an estate that does not entitle the owner thereof to possession immediately, but will or may give the owner possession in the future. A future interest is a present, legally protected right in property. It is not an expectancy. And some examples. O conveys land to A for life and on A's death to B in fee simple. A has a present possessory life estate. B has a future interest. B's future interest is an indefeasibly vested remainder. Oh my God. Upon the termination of A's possessory life estate, B's remainder in fee simple will become a present possessory estate in fee simple. But right now, it's an indefeasibly vested remainder. Because it's fee simple. It's not something less than fee simple. That's why it's indefeasible. Vested, I don't know, because A has to die. Because A has a life. And every life dies. And remainder is, I guess, what follows A. Oh my God. I don't even know what kind of a grant that was. I think it's a fee simple subject to executory interest because B would be the executory interest / remainder men, I think. Example number 2, let's explore this. O conveys land to A for life and on A's death to B in fee simple. If B survives A has a present possessory life estate again. B has a future interest again. Here it is a contingent remainder. Upon the termination of A's life estate, B's remainder in fee simple may become a present possessory interest in fee simple. B must survive A in order to take. In this example, O also has a future interest. He has not conveyed away the interest represented by a contingency that B may predecease A. If B does predecease A on the termination of A's life estate to the land, will revert to O. O's retained future interest is called a reversion. Oh, I believe this could be subject of fee. This could be a. Oh my God, no, I don't remember anything. Well, they don't say. I think it's a fee simple subject to condition. No. Condition subject. So subsequent. I don't know. Maybe not. After the conveyance, this is no longer an example. After the conveyance to A for life and on A's death to B, B can transfer his remainder interest to another person. Alternatively, if B dies during A's lifetime, his vested remainder will pass to the devisees under his will, or if B left no will, to his intestate heirs. Number 1, reversionary interest, future interest in the transferor. I was explaining how the possibilities of reversion and rights of entry were covered in the present possessory estates section. We discussed defeasible fees and their correlated future interest. Reversions. A person owning an estate in real property can create and transfer a lesser estate in the durational sense. The residue left in the grantor, which arises by operation of law, is a reversion. Example, O, owning land in fee simple, conveys it to Romanet 1 to A for life, or Romanet 2 to A for 99 years. In each case, O has a reversion in fee simple. She or her successors will be entitled to present possession of the land when the granted estate terminates. O, owning a life estate in land, leases it to A for 20 years. O has a reversion in a life estate. If O, what? O only had a life estate, so he gives it to A for 20 years. If O is still alive when A's lease expires, title will revert to O for life. What happens if 10 years after this transfer O dies? A's lease will come to an end, for he was given a lease by one holding only a life estate. O cannot convey a greater interest than she has. Now, third, O owning land in fee simple conveys it to A for life, and on A's death to B if B survives A. A has a life estate, B has a contingent remainder, and O has a reversion. Oh my God. That will take in present possession at A's death if B predeceases A. So these are all examples of reversions. Reversions are transferable, divisible at will, and descendable by inheritance. I'm going to read that one more time. It's kind of catchy. I may even write a song about it. Reversions are transferable, divisible by will, and descendable by inheritance. Yes. The holder of reversion may sue a possessory owner for waste and may recover against third-party wrongdoers for damages to the property to the extent of the injury to the reversion. All reversionary interests are vested. Although a reversionary interest becomes possessory in the future, it is a vested interest, not a contingent interest, because both the owner and the event upon which it will become possessory are certain. This is true even if the reversionary interest is determinable or defeasible. Because it is a vested interest, a reversionary interest is not subject to the rule against perpetuities. So I was thinking that this whole time, and they said it right there in bold. Reversionary interests are not subject to the rule against perpetuities because this one A for 99 years was suspicious, except that reversions are vested. What? Transferable, divisible by will, and descendable by inheritance, and not subject to the rule against perpetuities. Remainders. A remainder is a future interest created in a transferee that is capable of taking in present possession and enjoyment. Future interest created in transferee that is capable of taking in present possession and enjoyment. Capable of becoming a present interest upon the natural termination of the preceding estates created in the same disposition. Unlike a reversion, which arises by operation of law from the fact that the transferor has not made a complete disposition of his interest, a remainder must be expressly created in the instrument creating the intermediate possessory estate. At common law, the only preceding estates that could support a remainder were life estates and fee tails. So I want to mark this page just because that's a really fantastic definition. I might even read it again. Remainders of future interest created in a transferee that is capable of taking in present possession and enjoyment. I.e., capable of becoming a present interest upon the natural termination of the preceding estates created in the same disposition. Okay, so, it's got to be in the same instrument, though. Creating an intermediary possessory estate at common law only happen in life estates and fee tails. Because nearly all American jurisdictions have abolished the fee tail estate, the safe rule of thumb is that remainders always follow life estates. Note, according to the restatement of property, under modern law, a remainder can also follow a term of years. However, there is very little case law on the point, and it is so rare that it is extremely unlikely to be tested. All right. So there's where your remainder comes from. Now we know even where to. Not only do we know how to define it, we know why it exists, when it exists. This is my day. I can now function. In most cases, it follows a life estate. We used to follow fee tail and can follow a term of years. So this is the definition, and this is kind of the creation. Whatever. How it springs into existence. I'm kidding. I made that up, but I think it's true. Here's a bunch of examples. I feel like I need to read them. Even though I'm only 2 pages into this in 11 minutes. Oh my god. Contingent remainders are here. Related doctrine or merger, rule in Shelley's case. Executory interests. We're going to be here all day. Yes, we are. So we get to trusts. Oh my god. Alright, don't die. Look at these examples. To A for life, and on A's death to B and his heirs. A has a present possessory life estate. B has a remainder in fee simple. It is a remainder because upon the expiration of A's life estate, natural termination of the preceding estate, A will be entitled to present possession and enjoyment of the property. The term remainder derives from the consequence that when A's life estate comes to an end, title remains away from the transferor instead of reverting back to him. 2. On Monday, O conveys Blackacre to A for life. On Wednesday, O conveys all of my right, title, and interest in Blackacre to B. B holds a reversion, not a remainder. B's future interest was not created in the same disposition that gave A a life estate. The Monday conveyance gave A a life estate and raised a reversion in O. The Wednesday conveyance transferred O's reversion to B. Once a reversion, always a reversion. All right. Next page. A remainder cannot cut short or divest a preceding estate prior to its normal expiration. Therefore, a remainder can never follow a fee simple, which has a potentially infinite duration. Future interests that cut short a preceding estate or follow a gap after it are called executory interests. Okay. I can't believe how much sense this suddenly makes. All right, so you know when to use the term remainder and when not to. Okay, so you would never use a remainder. It's not a reversion, and it's not an executory interest. Because this one is a different instrument, and this too follows a fee simple. Because a remainder cannot cut short or divest the preceding estate. Never follow fee simple. Anyway, Indefeasibly vested remainder. An indefeasibly vested remainder is a remainder that can be created in and held only by an ascertained person or persons in being. Must be certain to become possessory on termination of the prior estates. So I'm reading 1 and 2 under indefeasibly vested remainders. Only can be held in an ascertained person or persons in being. Must be certain to become possessory or on termination of the prior estate. I.e., there's no condition that they may operate to prevent a remainder from someday becoming a present interest. Third, must not be subject to being defeated or divested. Compare the vested remainder subject to total divestment, and must not be subject to being diminished in size. Compare the vested remainder subject to open. These we're going to talk about soon, probably. Yeah. Examples. 2A for life, and on A's death to B. A has a life estate, B has an indefeasibly vested remainder, which is certain to take in possession on the termination of A's life estate. What if B dies in A's lifetime? There is no stated condition that B survive A in order to take, and the courts do not imply such a condition. B's indefeasibly vested remainder passes by will or intestacy to his successors who own an indefeasibly vested remainder. 2. To A for life, then to A's firstborn son and fee. At the time of this disposition, A has no children. The state of title, life estate in A, contingent remainder in the first son to be born to A, reversion in fee simple in the transferor. The reversion will take in present possession if A never has a son. The remainder is not vested because it is not created in an ascertained person in being. Also, it is not subject to condition that A have a child. So that's a contingent remainder in the firstborn son and a reversion in the transferor. It's not vested and is subject to condition. So that one's an example of what's not an indefeasibly vested remainder. I'm surprised that they give an example of what is one and what isn't one, but whatever. 2 years later, A had a son. The state of title. Okay, so now things have changed, right? So that's like the second step. The state of title now is that the life estate in A, there is a life estate in A, and an indefeasibly vested remainder in fee simple in the son. Vested remainder subject to open. This is a vested remainder created in a class of persons, example, children, brothers, and sisters, that is certain to take on the termination of the preceding estates, but is subject to diminution by reason of other persons becoming entitled to share in the remainder. It is also called a vested remainder subject to partial divestment. Examples, to A for life and on A's death to her children in equal shares. If at the time of the disposition A has no children, the state of title is life estate in A, contingent remainder in the unborn children of A, reversion in fee in the transferor, which will take in possession if A never has any children. Suppose 2 years later, a child Bob is born to A. The state of title now is a life estate in A, vested remainder subject to open in B. B's remainder is vested because he is in existence and ascertained, and his taking is not subject to any contingency. But it is vested subject to open because A may have more children. Two years later, another child, Ray, is born to A. Bob's remainder has been partially divested in favor of Ray, who also meets the description children of A. Bob and Ray now hold the vested remainder as tenants in common, each with an undivided 1/2 share subject to open. Example, their vested remainders will be partially divested if more children are born to A. 2 years later, Bob dies. Shortly thereafter, A dies. Bob's successors by will or intestacy Ray are entitled to present possession and enjoyment of the property. Bob's share of the remainder was subject to partial divestment, but it was not subject to being totally defeated. No condition of survival was attached to Bob's interest. Bob, or his successors, was certain to take. The only question was the size of his share. Gift by will to my wife, Rowena, for life, and on her death to my children in equal shares. T is survived by Rowena and by 3 children. At first blush, this looks like a vested remainder subject to open because it is a remainder to someone's children. In reality, though, it is indefeasibly vested. T, being dead, can have no more children. Slight qualification of answer. If Rowena is pregnant with T's child at T's death, the posthumous child, if born alive, will share in the gift. 1. Divesting interests are executory interests. Once the remainder vests in one existing member of the class, the divesting interest is the unborn members of the class is called an executory interest. So once the remainder vests in one existing member of the class, the divesting interest in the unborn members of the class is called an executory interest. Affected on marketability of title. Note that where there are outstanding interests in the unborn children, the vested remainder men and the life tenant cannot jointly convey a title. They can't? O, here's the example. O to A for life, remainder to B's children. C wants to buy the land and desires to know if he can get good title if he purchases from A and all of B's living children. The answer is no, as long as B is alive, because it is possible for B to have more children no matter what B's age. Thus, there would be outstanding interest in the unborn children of B, and C would not get good title. C, vested remainder subject to total divestment. And it's interesting because we're probably going to come back to that in that case. I think I just read about over here. It's not Shelley's case. Darn, I forgot the name of the case. Whatever. Actually, it's Caliph. Caliph, C-A-L-A-F. I feel like it actually Caliph. I'm gonna write Caliph in the margin here because I think that this has one time been done, like overcome, I'd say, the marketability of title problem. That's probably not the right name, but it's close. Vested remainder subject to total divestment. A vested remainder subject to total divestment arises when the remainderman is in existence and ascertained, and his interest is not subject to any condition precedent. But so the remainderman is an interest. Okay, we've got remainderman is in existence and ascertained, and his interest is not subject to any condition precedent, but his right to possession and enjoyment is subject to being defeated by the happening of some condition. Okay. Condition subsequent. Okay, so this is your fee simple, I want to say, subject to conditions. Is that what that's called? Everything, literally everything. It's not determinable. Condition subsequent. Okay. So that's total divestment. Follows the condition subsequent grant. Whereas this one over here, subject to open, whatever. That's just different. Okay. So finishing this thought of total divestment, Yeah, there's a potential condition subsequent that can defeat the living remainderman's interest. Here's the examples. To A for life, remainder to B and his heirs. But if at B's death he is not survived by issue, to C and his heirs. Here, B has a vested remainder in fee simple, but his fee simple interest is subject to being divested if at his death he is not survived by issue. C has a shifting executory interest. Now, example 2. To A for life, then to B for life. A has a life estate, B has a vested remainder in the life estate subject to total divestment. The transferor has a reversion in fee. B's remainder is vested even though, as a practical matter, he must survive A in order to take. But this practical requirement does not make B's remainder contingent. The only condition to B's taking is the natural termination of A's life estate, and this condition is inherent in any remainder life estate. There is no other condition precedent. However, B's remainder life estate is not indefeasibly vested, for it will be defeated if he dies in A's lifetime. Therefore, it is a vested remainder subject to total divestment. I also thought it was it is a remainder. Okay, so what is it not? To A for life, then to B for life. Whatever. I just find it hard to believe there's a remainder and a right to reversion or to future estate interests. I don't know. I'm confused now. Example 3, to A for life and on A's death to B. But if B predeceases A on A's death to C, A has a life estate, B has a vested remainder subject to total divestment. Although B's taking, I think that's the same as it was before. B's taking is contingent on his surviving A. That contingency is expressed as a condition subsequent, meaning that B's remainder is subject to total divestment. C has a shifting executory interest. How is this different than before? To A for life, then to B for life? Okay, so is this not vested? No, it is vested remainder. In both of these circumstances, it's a vested remainder, but subject to total divestment. Contingent remainder. There are 2 ways to create a contingent remainder: subject to condition precedent and unborn or unascertained persons. And destructibility of contingent remainders. That's going to come next. All right, kind of putting this back into focus. Remember the definition of remainder? Yes. Pretty much only follows life estates, maybe estate of years, yeah. Okay. So back to contingent remainders. Subject to condition precedent. A remainder will be classified as contingent if its taking in possession is subject to a condition precedent contingent as to event. Examples: to A for life and on A's death to B if B survives A. A has a life estate. B has a contingent remainder in fee simple. The transferor has a reversion, which will become a possessory estate on the termination of A's life estate if B predeceases A. Here, B is taking is subject to a contingency stated as a condition precedent that he must survive A in order to take. Everywhere else it's implied, but when it's written as a condition precedent, it's considered a contingent remainder. The question is it vested? All right, keep reading. I lost my spot. Compare this with example 3, which is what I was just doing in the preceding section, in that example B's taking is also subject to a contingency. He must survive A in order to take. Thus, in substance, this example and example 3 are quite similar, but in classifying future interest, the general rule is that it is form, not substance, that counts. In example 3, the contingency of survival is expressed as a condition subsequent. Therefore, B's remainder is vested, subject to total divestment. But in this example, the contingency of survival is expressed as a condition precedent. Therefore, B's remainder is a contingent remainder. So that's why it's not vested subject to total, a remainder vested subject to total divestment. It's because it's stated as a condition. I already said this. Because it's stated as a condition precedent, it's a contingent remainder. Okay, whatever. Let me drop the F word. Example number 2. To A for life and on A's death to B if B marries C. Here B is an ascertained person, but there is a condition precedent to B's taking. He must marry C. If B marries C in A's lifetime, his remainder will become indefeasibly vested. Example number 3. O conveys to A for life, then to B and his heirs if B survives A. If B does not survive A, then to C and his heirs. Each remainder is contingent because each is subject to condition precedent. They are mutually exclusive and exhaustive, i.e., only one can come into possession, and when it does, the other can never do so. These are called alternate contingent remainders. O conveys, last example. O conveys to A for life, then to B and his heirs, but if B marries C, then to D and his heirs. Here, B, an ascertained person, takes a vested remainder because it is not limited on the condition precedent. B's remainder is ready to come into possession whenever A dies, but the marriage condition is subsequent. B's marriage to C will forfeit his estate. D's interest is called an executory interest. Okay, so unborn or unascertained persons, a remainder is contingent. This is the second example. If it is created in favor of unborn or unascertained persons, contingent as to person is another way to call that. Because until the remainderman is ascertained, there is no one ready to take possession should the preceding estate come to an end. Here's the examples. To A for life and on A's death per stirpes to such of A's descendants as survive her. At the time of the disposition, A is in poor health and she has 2 adult children, B and C, who are very healthy. State of the title. A has a life estate. There is a contingent remainder in such of A's descendants as survive A. The transferor has a reversion for A may not be survived by any descendants. While the odds of B and C's favor are in B and C's favor, they will take the remainder upon A's death. They are not named as the remaindermen. The remainder is in such of A's descendants as survive A, and we will not be able to identify the remainderman until A dies, and we can see which of A's descendants survived her. Next example. 2. O transfers securities and trust to pay the income to A for life, and on A's death, to distribute the trust corpus to A's heirs. There is a contingent remainder in A's heirs. It is true that A's heirs will be determined in the moment A dies and A's life estate terminates, but at the time O makes the transfer, the remainder men are not ascertainable. For nemo es heres viventis. Viventis. No one is heir of the living. The persons who turn out to be A's heirs will not be ascertained until A dies. Destructibility of contingent remainders. At common law, a contingent remainder had to vest prior to or upon termination of the preceding freehold estate, or it was destroyed. Here's your examples. But I believe that destructibility of contingent remainders has been abolished. For common law, contingent remainder had to vest prior to termination of the preceding freehold estate, or it was destroyed. So the rule's been abolished. And then there's this related doctrine of merger. And I'm going to end at that point when we start getting into the rule of Shelley's case. So let's read these examples of the destructibility of contingent remainders. So O conveyed to A for life, then to the heirs of B. If A predeceased B, there were no heirs of B to take possession, so the remainder was destroyed, and O or his estate retook possession. Right, because that's a tough one to explain. Example 2. O conveyed to A for life, then to B if she reaches age 21. If A died before B reached 21, the remainder was destroyed. Note that whenever a grantor created a contingent remainder, he retained reversion, which was normally defeasible. Analysis. Why are the interests in the above examples remainders and not executory interests? In each instance, it is possible that the future interest will take effect at the natural expiration of A's life estate, as remainders do, or that it will take effect following a gap after A's estate, as executory interests do. The rule is that if an interest may operate as either a remainder or an executory interest, depending on the circumstances at A's death, it is a remainder. Thus, at common law, if such a remainder was then called upon to act as an executory interest, it could not do so and was destroyed. Okay, so we weren't commingling things. And maybe at the time, when real property was something that made sense, because you couldn't commingle the things, and now that you can, it doesn't make sense. So the rule's been abolished. Today, the rule of indestructibility. You can't commingle what, Erica? You cannot have, at least at common law, you cannot have both the remainder and an executory interest. I don't know if I'm understanding this right, actually. So I could reread it, but I'm just going to listen to it again and see that it makes sense. I mean, the springing and the shifting interests do explain what's going on, because and it'll be discussed right here. So today, the rule of destructibility has been abolished in all but a few states. Thus, in the two examples given above, on A's death, O's reversion would take over, and then and would then give way to a springing executory interest on B's death in the first example, because it was to A for life, then to the heirs of B. And on B's attaining 21 in the second, because that second grant was to A for life, then to B if she reaches age 21. Note that the contingent remainders are not destroyed when the preceding estate ends, but instead becoming executory interest because they will divest the transferor's estate. Related doctrine of merger. Whenever the same person acquires all of the existing interest in the land, present and future, the merger occurs. That person then holds a fee simple absolute. For example, suppose O conveys by deed to A for life. O now has a reversion. Subsequently, by later deed, O conveys his reversion interest to A. A will have a fee simple absolute by merger. A similar result would follow if A conveyed her life estate to O. Moreover, the common law held as an aspect of the destructibility doctrine that if a person acquired all of the interest in the land except a contingent remainder, the merger would occur anyway, and the contingent remainder would be destroyed. Contingent remainders were considered to be such flimsy, ephemeral interests that they would not keep the merger from occurring. Note that this is still the rule in those few states retain the common law rule of destructibility. This is kind of important for like one MBE question, I think. There's an example here. In example 1 above, O to A for life, then to the heirs of B. Title stands as a life estate in A contingent remainder in the as yet unascertained heirs of B, and a reversion if B is still alive at the death of A and O. If O then purchased A's interest, O would hold a life estate per ultra V for the life of A and a reversion. That's BS. Really? Oh, yeah. Okay. If O purchased A's interest, O would hold a life estate per ultra V for the life of A and a reversion. At common law, O's two interests on either side of the contingent remainder were merged, wiping out the contingent remainder and giving O a fee simple. Got it. Okay. Comparable. Interest created simultaneously. If a life estate and the next vested interest were created simultaneously by the same instrument, there would be no merger at that time because that would defeat the grantor's obvious intent to create a contingent remainder. However, if the life tenant subsequently conveyed his interest to the holder of the next vested estate, the contingent remainder would then be destroyed. Well, duh, because it would be merged. Fee simple in remainder, man. I don't know. But I'm going to stop here because it's 43 minutes. I know I only went 6 pages, but that was really a lot of examples.